Welcome. My name is Grandma Storm. I write stories for young adults and old children. Today I am reading chapters 1 through 5 in my book, Nowhere, Ohio. Chapter 1. Stealing stuff at the drugstore was one thing. Who cares about a candy bar or two? But throwing rocks at cars was another. Mom and Dad were really mad when the cops came to the apartment. But that was a year ago. It was the prank at school that made them decide to move. I hated Miss Cooney. She was such a weirdo. She had white hair, buck teeth, and walked with a limp. She taught English classes, but could teach Latin, so the junior high offered it as a one-semester elective. Mom thought it would be good for me to take Latin. She said she had taken it when she was young, and that it helped her understand English grammar. But then Mom could speak German and Chinese, too. Whatever. The longer I sat in that chair, the longer I wondered why I was there. Why did any of this matter? My buddy Jerry had a brother, Greg, in high school. I was at Jerry's one night when Greg and his friends were passing around stuff Greg had helped himself to out of the chemistry lab. He let us kids smell the stuff in the bottles. I gagged and nearly threw up. Greg and his friends laughed at me. Later, I took the one labeled stomach acid. If Greg noticed that I walked out with it, he didn't care. At school the next morning, I poured the stuff down the vents in Miss Cooney's class in the library. Oh, I hated the librarian, Mrs. Baker, too. Soon the whole building smelled exactly like puke. They had to evacuate the school. No classes that day or the next. It turned out they had to run fans for 2 days with all the windows open in January. Jerry came running up to me the day the school reopened. Elijah, did you do it? Do what? You know, pour that stuff down the vents in Miss Cooney's room. I just shrugged my shoulders. No one was going to pin that on me, not even Jerry. I was too smart for that. 2 days later, I was called to the principal's office. Miss Cooney, the librarian, Mrs. Baker, and the principal, Mr. Jeffers, were there. Elijah, have a seat, said Mr. Jeffers. Then they just stared at me like they could mind meld a confession out of me. I was cool. I just sat there. No one had seen me. No one could prove anything. I was golden. After a while, I said, "Can I go now?" "Don't you have anything to say?" Mr. Jeffers asked. "Should I?" They didn't like that. "Elijah, we know you did it." I looked straight at Mr. Jeffers with my baby blues. I said nothing. I knew the first person to speak would be the loser. Miss Cooney opened her mouth. No surprise. She was a loser and would always be a loser. Unmarried, ancient, ugly, loser, loser, loser. "Elijah, we only want to help you. No action will be taken against you if you will confess," she said as her voice cracked and a tear traced down her cheek. Oh, brother. I wanted to stop thinking about them, so I pulled out my cell phone and stared at it while they continued to stare at me. I tossed back my blonde hair, stretched my legs, and slumped in the chair. Might as well get comfortable. I was about to ask again if I could go when Mr. Jeffers said, We have video evidence of you entering both the library and Miss Cooney's room before first bell. Would you like to see it? Your parents are on their way. I plan on showing the video to them. Video evidence. That was bad. But what could they prove? That I went to 2 rooms before school started? Not enough to get me, but I started to feel hot and wanted to get out of there. Mr. Jeffers continued. Greg Martin was caught stealing from the high school chemistry lab. He said you were at his house and might have taken one of the bottles. Then we talked to his brother Jerry. He says he asked you directly if you poured the acid down the vents. He says you acted like it was a joke. I assure you, Elijah Walker, this is not a joke. He then went on to outline the janitorial costs, the lost school days, the damage to school property. I stopped listening and started thinking what rats Greg and Jerry were. Man, were they in trouble. I was going to get back at them good. Elijah, are you listening? I wasn't, but I looked up to see Mom and Dad coming into the office. Mom looked sick and Dad looked mad. That was my last day of school. Mom quit her job at the refugee center that day. Within a month, Dad broke the lease to the apartment and we moved from the city to the middle of nowhere. Nowhere, Ohio. That's what I called it. Dad and Mom rented an old house they found on the internet. If they wanted primitive, they got it. The listing specified that there was no cable and no internet. It came furnished. It had electricity. Those were the best things you could say about it. The picture of the place was dismal. A dumpy ranch with a shed in the back. Dad said the price was right, and that was that. Mom was into this Marie Kondo thing. Simple living, minimalism. You know, get rid of stuff that doesn't spark joy. Apparently, not much in the apartment sparked joy for Mom. She sold almost everything on Craigslist and the rest through a neighborhood Facebook group. I think there was a trip to dump the rest at Goodwill, too. She packed 4 suitcases, a backpack for each of us, and a box of toys for Susie, my little sister. Mom would stay home with Susie and me for the first time in my life. That would be weird. Dad said the county library in Nowhere, Ohio, had internet and that he could work from there a few days a week. I never did get even with that traitor Jerry or that rotten Greg. Until we left town, Mom would not let me out of the apartment alone. She took away my cell phone, too. I made plans, though. Maybe burn down Jerry and Greg's house. By mid-February, we were driving away. I watched out the car window. It is the only place I ever knew dissolved in the winter sleet. Then it got dark, and I couldn't see anything. Susie was fussy, and Mom crawled in the back seat. She told me to sit by Dad. I crawled up front. Dad drove through the night with a pit stop at a McDonald's and a gas station. I woke up to a gray sky propped up by gray trees. Every once in a while, we passed a car or a house. But as Dad kept driving, we saw fewer houses and more woods. Honey, said Dad. He certainly wasn't talking to me. Dig the directions out of your purse that the landlord emailed. When we get closer, you'll need to read them to me. He said GPS isn't any good after this town. I looked out the window. What town? I thought. There was a sign that read Dollar General, whatever that was, a boarded up diner, and a gas station. Mom rummaged in her purse and found the directions. "Let's stop at the Dollar General," Mom said. I went to get some groceries. It was starting to snow as Dad pulled into the parking lot. Susie and Mom went into the store. "Elijah," Dad had hardly talked to me since the day he pulled me out of school. He was busy, and I pretty much stayed in my room. Here was the big speech, I thought. Now he was going to tell me how I ruined everyone's life. "Yeah," I yawned. "I am sorry you had trouble in school, but I think this move will be good for us. A fresh start. By the way, Mom and I have decided to homeschool you." "What?" I blurted. "Is that legal?" "Yep. State of Ohio has a few requirements, but Mom thinks she can handle that." "What about books and stuff?" "Mom says the county library can supply what you need. She wants me to teach math. She is going to handle languages and history." "What about science and stuff?" "I think you have had enough chemistry for a while." I grimaced. "What about friends?" "I think you've had enough friends for a while, too." I grimaced again. "What am I supposed to do with myself in the middle of nowhere?" I whined. "Well, that is up to you. After you get your schoolwork done and do whatever else your mother wants you to do, you can go off into the woods. The rental is surrounded by a state forest. No neighbors as far as I know." "Any Indians?" "Very funny," muttered Dad. Mom opened the door and buckled Susie in her booster seat. "Please pop the trunk. Elijah, sit in the back." Dad hit the release and Mom loaded bags in the trunk. She got in, and we drove away. "Is there a Whole Foods or even a Trader Joe's anywhere near here?" Mom asked. "Dollar General has stuff that looks kind of like food, but the healthiest things I bought were frozen pizzas. Everything is either boxed or canned." "You, girl, are in for a big adjustment," said Dad as he pulled out of the parking lot. "Around here, I bet nobody has even heard of Whole Foods. Next town is miles and miles away. If you are lucky, there might be a Walmart." "No worries," replied Mom cheerfully. "Maybe this spring I can plant a garden. Grow your own food. Let's ask the landlord if we could get some chickens." Mom kept talking about gardens and chickens. She even hinted at getting a cow. We are going to starve, I thought. It was snowing harder. Dad kept driving. Would we ever get there? "Turn left," directed Mom. "Are you sure?" "Just turn left. That's what the directions say." Dad took the left and followed it down a hill. He stopped at a creek. "Are we supposed to cross that? Do the directions mention a river without a bridge?" "The directions say the creek is low most of the time," confirmed Mom. "Great," said Dad. "Here goes nothing." The car made it through the water, climbed up a hill, and turned a curve around a clump of pines. "Wow!" Mom exclaimed. "Look at that!" "Whoa!" Dad shouted as he hit the brakes. "Are you sure you read the directions right?" "Yes," said Mom, irritation edging her voice. Okay, just asking. But that is not the house we rented on the internet." I sat up. The house was huge. In the city, 10 families could live in something like that. Dad was right. The internet picture was a shack compared to this. The house rose from the top of the hill, backed by a thick forest of evergreens. It was 2.5 stories of gray fieldstone with a deep porch painted white, wrapping all the way around it. All the windows were wide, tall, and framed by green shutters matching the trees behind the house. Correction, it was not a house. It was a mansion. Oh, and there was a big barn out back, painted green. Something is really wrong, muttered Dad. Park the car, said Mom. Let's ask the homeowners if they know where our rental is. Dad pulled over. Mom got Susie out of the booster. I looked out the window. The snow was really coming down, so I mumbled, I'll just stay in the car. Okay, said Dad. Suture yourself. I watched as Mom, Dad, and Susie climbed the wide steps to the front porch. Dad knocked. No answer. Mom peeked in a window. They were turning back when Mom picked up something off a little table. Dad and Mom were looking at an envelope. I got out of the car as they pulled out a letter. Shock played over their faces as they read it. Are you kidding? Dad was saying as I walked up. How could this be our place? Read it again. Mom read, Warmest welcome to the Brooks and Emily Walker family. This is your new home. We at Living Waters Rentals hope you will find all in order. Enclosed are 2 keys to the front door and 1 to the back. The house was cleaned and fresh sheets put on the beds yesterday. The heat is on, the water heater is new, and the woodshed stocked for the fireplaces. Please make yourselves at home. If you have any questions or problems, just call. Well, said Dad, we are the Walkers. That much is right. But this is not the house we rented. What is that number? Mom read it to him. Dad pulled out his cell phone. No service. Great, mumbled Dad. Have any bars on your phone? Mom looked, then shook her head. Okay, sighed Dad. Everybody get back in the car. I've got to get somewhere where I can find some bars. I have to go to the bathroom, announced Susie. Can't you wait? Mom asked. No, cried Susie. I have to go poo-poo. Oh, brother, I said, but nobody was listening to me. Look, said Mom to Dad, we have keys. There has been some sort of mix-up. We'll use the bathrooms and apologize later. Honest mistake on someone's part. Okay, agreed Dad. Mom stuck the key in the lock and the front door swung open. Let me take a second and describe that front door. First, it was double wide and towering like it was made for people that were 10 feet tall. Into the dark wood were carved gigantic trees and a wide river. The oval knob was silver with a wide panel surrounding the keyhole. Living Waters Rentals was stamped on it in a fancy, twirly script. The door swung open to an expansive hall with a curved staircase open to the floors above. Whoa, murmured Mom. This is beautiful. Pooh, pooh, yelled Susie. Menfolk, ordered Mom, find us a bathroom. Dad and I raced to find a toilet. Wow, Dad yelled. Emily, you've got to see the chandelier in the dining room. And there is a baby grand piano in the living room. The kitchen is amazing. Wow, I echoed Dad's enthusiasm. This is like something out of Downton Abbey. Mom, Dad, these people have a legit study. I have never seen so many books. There is a fireplace and everything. Just find a bathroom, Mom yelled. Pooh, pooh, Susie screamed. Found it, hollered Dad. Mom and Dad got Susie to a toilet in time. I went back to the front hall. It was getting dark. All I could find were a couple of brass buttons where a light switch should have been. I pushed one and a chandelier blazed to life. I ran up the stairs. A wide hall led to 4 big bedrooms, each with its own marble-tiled bathroom. The closets alone were bigger than our living room back in the city. The staircase narrowed to the 3rd floor, but at the top of the house was a huge room with dormers and skylights staring into the snowy sky. I heard Dad yelling for me, so I ran down the stairs. Dad, this is the neatest place. I was going to tell him about the amazing bedrooms and the 3rd floor when the blizzard hit. The wind started first with a high-pitched howl that scared Susie and made her cry. Mom picked her up while Dad and I ran to the front door. He opened it, and a blast of snow hit us in the face. Emily, did you see a storm like this coming on the weather app? Dad yelled as we both struggled to push the door shut. Cell phones don't work out here, remember? Right, said Dad. Look, we can't take the kids out in this. It is blowing like a hurricane out there. What if we start driving and the car gets stuck in this storm? We'll have to camp here for the night and try to straighten this out in the morning. What do you need from the car? The groceries and the backpacks. Bumpy! Daddy, get me Bumpy too. Come on, Elijah. Dad and I ran to the car and found the stuff Mom wanted. I grabbed Bumpy. Bumpy was Susie's beat-up stuffed dog. If it hadn't been for the lights in the house, we couldn't have found our way back. It was snowing that hard. No kidding. The wind and snow blew for 2 days. We were getting low on food and definitely tired of frozen pizzas when the blizzard stopped. Dad and I found shovels in the barn and spent the next 2 days digging out a path for the car. We made it down the hill, over the creek, and out to the road as the snow plow came by. The guy behind the wheel waved as he buried our freshly shoveled path and plowed on down the road. We just stood there, defeated by a new mountain of snow. I'm beat, groaned Dad. Let's go back to the house. When we came in, Mom, Susie, and Bumpy were in the living room, sitting on a green velvet couch. They had found a whole pile of old-fashioned golden books that Mom was reading to Susie. How about a cup of coffee? Dad asked as he and I stomped snow off our boots. Sure, said Mom, but we are out of milk, so there's nothing to put in it. I think we can make it out this afternoon, said Dad. Elijah and I cleared the whole drive, but then the snowplow guy buried the end beyond the creek. After a break, we can finish the job. Time to pack up and solve this mystery of where our rental house really is. Brooks, said Mom. What? I found a phone. You mean your cell worked? No, I found a telephone, a landline. Show me. Dad and I followed Mom down the hall to the study. Behind a wooden panel, which blended seamlessly with the walls, was a small windowless room with a desk, chair, lamp, and a telephone. I knew it was a telephone. I had seen pictures of them. But this one didn't have buttons for the numbers. How does it work? I wondered aloud. It's called a rotary dial telephone, explained Mom as she demonstrated the odd clicking sounds coming from inside as the disc rotated on the contraption. Mom used her finger to make the disc spin. I tried it. Hard to believe such an old thing could work. I called the number in that envelope we found on the porch, said Mom. I talked to the manager at Living Water Rentals. This really is the house we rented. You're kidding, was all Dad could say. Chapter 2. Mom walked around in a happy stupor for a week. She kept saying things like, I love the pink rose wallpaper in Susie's room. I love the 12-foot ceilings. I love the huge clawfoot tub in the master bath. I love the Delft tile around the dining room fireplace. I love the green velvet sofa. All the furniture is like something in Victoria magazine. I guess she was in love. Hope Dad didn't feel slighted. After we shoveled the end of the driveway, again, Dad in the car escaped to town to work at the county library. He also found a better grocery store than the Dollar General. No more frozen pizzas for us. Mom still talked about getting chickens in the spring, but Dad argued it was cheaper just to buy eggs. Then she pointed out the educational advantages of raising chickens. Look, I broke into the conversation. You don't have to get chickens for my sake. Mom has enough educational advantages waiting for me in the study. It was true. Every time I turned around, she was putting a new book in my stack on the table in the study. Dad would bring home books, but Mom began to think the study in the house offered a better selection than the county library. With its dark paneled walls, towers of books, comfy chairs, and wide fireplace, the study was like something out of a castle. It almost made me want to read. I just love homeschooling, said Mom. Later that week, she started German. I thought that was as pointless as Latin with Miss Cooney. Every German I ever saw on TV, like in the Olympics or tennis, spoke perfectly good English. That was another point. No TV, no cell phones, no internet. I thought I was going to dry up and die. My escape was to go out the back door and into the woods. My boots breaking through the crust on top of the snow was loud in the surrounding silence. When I stopped, the sound of my own breathing filled the void. To a boy raised in a city apartment, the sound of cars, sirens, and trains was my nightly lullaby. There was so much silence here. I didn't know what to do with it all. It was rather scary. I always kept the house in sight for a while. When I wasn't outside, I'd escape from Mom and that pile of books to the huge attic. Whoever lived here before left a lot of stuff behind. There were trunks filled with old clothes, soldiers' uniforms mainly. There were a couple of upholstered armchairs with footstools. Among all the boxes and trunks was a wooden crate filled with flat, black discs in cardboard sleeves. Reading the labels, I figured it must have something to do with music. I took one down to Mom. Where did you find this? Mom asked as I handed her one of the flat, black disc things. In the attic. There's a whole bunch of them. 78s, she said in a slow, pondering sort of way. What? It's a record. A record? I repeated. Records even predate me, said Mom, so you know they're old, but 78s are older than old. Did you see a record player up there? Mom, if I didn't know what this was, I said as I took back the record, I certainly wouldn't know what a record player looks like. What does 78 stand for? RPMs, 78 revolutions per minute. It's how fast the record spins on the turntable. I was so confused, I must have been looking at her like she had 3 heads. Mom laughed and said, "Let me grab Susie and we'll go to the attic to see if we can find a record player." The 3 of us and Bumpy made our way to the top of the house. Mom thought all the stuff I found was amazing. I love all these antiques. There she went again, loving all the stuff in the house. I think she had forgotten all about the Marie Kondo, or maybe all this stuff was bringing her joy. "Look, Elijah," said Mom, as she opened a lid on what I thought was an ordinary dresser. "This is a record player. Let's see if it works." Between the 2 of us, we figured it out. Soon a recording of Hot Rod Race by Red Foley was blasting in the attic, and Mom, Susie, Bumpy, and I were dancing. Now me and my wife and my brother Joe took off in my Ford from San Pedro. We hadn't much gas, and the tires were low, but the doggone Ford could really go. "I love this music," yelled Susie. Chapter 3. I was sitting in the attic with an old soldier's cap on my head, reading a book I could not put down. The title was The Count of Monte Cristo. I had never liked the forgettable stuff they forced me to read in school. This book was a total adventure. Mom came up the stairs. "Thought I'd find you here. What you reading?" I held up the book. "Smile." I smiled. Mom was taking pictures of everything. Her phone didn't have a connection, but the camera worked. She planned to have Dad take it into the library and download the pictures to her Chatbooks account. "Dinner time, Elijah. Dad is home." "Any more books as good as this?" I asked as I noted the page number before following her down the stairs. "Check in your stack after dinner." In my stack in the library, Mom had added Ivanhoe by Sir Walter Scott, Oliver Twist by Charles Dickens, The Wizard of Oz by L. Frank Baum, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by Jules Verne, and The Adventures of Tom Sawyer by Mark Twain. Mark Twain. I had heard of him. I picked up his book when I finished The Count of Monte Cristo. That started me on a whole Mark Twain kick. The study seemed to have everything ever written by him. His stuff was hilarious. Mom couldn't make up her mind. One day she was worried that I didn't like to read. The next day she was talking about limiting the amount of time I read. Women. She kept after me about German too. Conjugating haben was boring. Learning that German required genders for all the nouns was ridiculous. Der, die, das. Ridiculous. Then I found something Mark Twain had written about German. In early times, some sufferer had to sit up with a toothache, and he put in the time inventing the German language. The next time Mom tortured me with too much German, I quoted it to her. She laughed. I have a joke for you, too, said Mom. A mother mouse and her mouse son were in the woods when suddenly a cat attacks them. The mother shouts, "Bark!" The cat runs away. "See," said the mother mouse to her son, "now do you understand why it's important to learn a foreign language?" Mom cracked up over her own joke, while I stood there with the expression, "Really?" written all over my face. When she calmed down, she said, "Okay, enough for today. Go outside and don't come back until you find an Indian." She thought that was hilarious and went to the kitchen, laughing all the way. Why did she bring up the Indian thing? Had Dad told her about the comment I made about Indians when we first came to Nowhere, Ohio? Parents, they are always in cahoots. I am sure Mark Twain would like the word cahoots, probably invented it. I bundled up and ran out the back door and into the woods. The snow was so deep it came in over the top of my boots. I decided I didn't care if it did. Then it occurred to me that I would be able to find my way back home by following my tracks. I could explore away from the house and not worry about getting lost. It seemed so obvious once I thought of it. Dumb me, just a city boy through and through. The sun was shining and there was no wind, even though the thermometer on the side of the barn read 20 degrees. It was a nice day. Hiking through the forest, I felt a little like the guys in Mark Twain's books, skipping school and out for an adventure. I wondered if I might find a cave or maybe even Injun Joe out here in the wilds of Nowhere, Ohio. Injun Joe. Ridiculous. That made me laugh out loud. Must have my mom's sense of humor. Finding a cave would be super neat. With all the hills, there might be one. Or maybe I could dig one in the spring. A cave would be a great place to make a fort or hide from people. Not that there was anyone around. That is when I came across a set of footprints that were not mine. I knew the footprints were not mine because I had never been this far from home before. I once read about the hair standing up on the back of a person's neck, but never experienced it until then. I turned around and ran home. "Oh, you're back," said Mom when the back door slammed shut behind me. "Find an Indian?" Then she laughed again. Not in the mood for conversation, I mumbled something about wanting a cup of hot chocolate. I thought about those footprints for the next 2 days. Mom thought I was unusually compliant about getting my homeschool assignments completed. She even asked if I was feeling okay. But I kept thinking about those footprints. Dad said there were no neighbors. Maybe it was a hunter, but there was a sign posted on the edge of the property. It read, "No hunting." Maybe an axe murderer was stalking out the house. I almost talked to Dad about it, but I knew how ridiculous that would sound. Fortunately, it was snowing again. The weather was so bad, it would even keep an axe murderer at home. I remembered when we were still living in civilization that the TV news guy once said when the weather was so cold, something like 25 below, the cops reported that even the thieves stayed home. I was not going out in that mess either, so I endured German vocabulary instead. At least Mom was not making me learn Chinese. Susie was not so lucky. Mom sat down with her every day and played with her while talking in Chinese. Pretty soon Susie was chattering in Chinese to Bumpy. And then there was math and science. Those were not Mom's strong points. Math was easy for Dad, so he did that with me. For science, Dad brought home books the county librarians had covered what a junior high kid was supposed to learn. It was the usual stuff. A big bang happened a gazillion billion years ago. The universe glued itself together somehow. Life came out of soup, and people came from apes. Memorize, regurgitate. That was what we did in school anyway. Hated that stuff. How inspiring to think that all I was advanced pond scum. Jerry and Greg were pond scum. That was for sure. Hadn't thought about them much since I moved to Nowhere, Ohio. It was funny to think they were still doing stuff. My world was so different now. I was surprised that I did not miss them or the city. I had enough people in my books. They didn't give me any trouble. The next day, the snow stopped and the sun shone. After school, I escaped to the woods. There was a new smell to the air. The wind wasn't freezing the hairs on my nose anymore, and snow was slipping off the trees. Winter in the city was black ice on frozen concrete and gray slush splashed by buses. Not pretty. Winter in Nowhere, Ohio was pretty. The colors that day were snow white, sky blue, pine green, and bark black. I loved it. Oops, starting to sound like Mom. At the top of the next hill, I decided to build a snow fort near an old, twisted pine. Soon I had a proper fort with turrets. Tom Sawyer would like it, I thought. I laid back in my creation and looked at the sky through a screen of pine needles. The sun was getting low. It was time to head home. As I crunched my way back, I thought I would dig in the trunks in the attic for a flag for my fort. Chapter 4. As much as Mom was in love with House, she was a people person. That was one of the reasons she did that refugee work back in the city. For weeks now, we were housebound. Dad was the only escapee. He made money and bought groceries. Conversation at the dinner table that night took a new twist. Brooks, can I take the car to Walmart? What do you want? To get out, pouted Mom. I thought you loved this house. I do, but I love people too. Walmart is in the next county. I would rather not spend gas money. Plus, you're sure to buy stuff we don't need. Remember Marie Kondo? Mom was miffed. What do people do around here anyway? Mom asked, sounding a bit touchy. Well, in town, besides the library, there is a gas station, a post office, the courthouse, something called Nana's Gift Shop and Liquid Embroidery. What in the world is liquid embroidery anyway? But then I think that is closed. A bar, the grocery store, and a church. Sounds not exciting. Any coffee shops that bake amazing pastries? The gas station has one of those machines that roasts hot dogs on spits, offered Dad. Gross, muttered Mom. I've been itching to watch some hockey, said Dad. What do you say we pack up the kids and take them to the bar Friday night? There's bound to be a TV there. That's how we ended up in Lou's Friday night. There were 2 TVs. Both had a hockey game. Dad got a beer. Mom got a sandwich. Susie and I split an order of fries. Dad didn't care about either teams, but it was something to watch. It was fun to see commercials. I always liked the funny ones. I'm not into sports, so I just watched the few guys hanging out. One guy wasn't watching the TV. He was watching Susie. I zeroed in on him. I know a creeper when I see one. You would see them watching kids at the park in the city. This guy was a definite creeper. Mom, when are we going home? I whined because suddenly I just wanted to get out of there. When your father is done watching the game, what is your problem? Aren't you glad to get out? I thought you were dying to watch TV. I slumped back in the booth but kept watching the creeper. He had a paunch supported by a belt that was barely covered by a plaid shirt. A black hawk's cap pushed back on his bald head, and baggy blue jeans that sagged over old boots. I don't like the way that guy is looking at Susie, I said to Mom. Mom picked up on it right away. She looked at the creeper, and he turned back to the TV. So I thought he got the message to leave us alone. But in a while, he came over to the table, all friendly like. Hi, folks, said the creeper to Dad. New to town, ain't ya? Mind if I join you? Dad was all smiles. After all, this is what Mom wanted, to get out and meet people, and here, standing right before them, was a genuine person. Sure, said Dad as he scooted over to make room for the man. My name is Brooks Walker. This is my wife, Emily, and our kids, Elijah and Susie. Dad looked at Mom when he introduced her. She had the strangest look on her face, like he had done something wrong. Confused and then a little mad at her, he turned back to the man. I see you are a Blackhawks fan, continued Dad. Sorry your team is not doing so well tonight. What's your name? Name is Joe, said the creeper, still standing. Glad to meet you. Where you folks live? Dad launched into the whole story, telling his new friend Joe how he was working remotely and that he and Mom had rented the house at Living Waters. Nice place? Asked Joe as he ignored the open space by Dad and slid in next to Susie. My wife loves it, right, honey? Mom pulled Susie onto her lap. Yeah, love it. Dad looked at Mom with a puzzled expression, but went right on telling Black Hawk Joe, that's what I decided to call him, all about how remote the place was where we lived, how he left the wife and kids all alone at the house when he came clear into town to work. He told Joe that the place didn't have cell service or internet or even TV, and that was why they came into town tonight to watch a hockey game. Black Hawk Joe nodded from time to time. Cute little girl you got. Yeah, agreed Dad with a big smile. She is our little sweetheart. Mind if I give her a piece of candy? Said Black Hawk Joe. Why, look at the time, interrupted Mom. Honey, we got to get these kids home. It's past their bedtime. Okay, said Dad with a confused look on his face. Black Hawk Joe didn't budge. Excuse me, said Mom. The creeper let Mom and Susie squeeze past. I'm taking her to the bathroom, Brooks. Then let's go. Black Hawk Joe watched as Mom and Susie walked away. Nice family, said Black Hawk Joe. Mind if me and the missus stop by sometime? That sounds neighborly, said Dad. Let me give you our address. That's when I kicked him. Elijah, are you okay? Come on, Dad, let's go. Excuse me, Joe, got to go. Say, why don't you give me your phone number? I'll talk to Emily about having you and your wife over. no phone, muttered Black Hawk Joe. Mom and Susie came back and we left. Susie fell asleep in her booster as soon as we drove away. The fries and the creeper made me sick to my stomach. Dad, pull over. I'm going to throw up. Fortunately, he believed me. I got rid of the fries in a snowbank. I wish I could puke Black Hawk Joe out of my brain as easily. Chapter 5. Mom, can I use this for a flag for my fort? It was late Saturday morning. I was feeling better after throwing up in the snowbank last night. The sun was shining and the snow was melting. I wanted to enjoy my fort before it turned into a puddle. I'd found a flag in one of the trunks in the attic. What fort? Mom asked while she was washing dishes in the kitchen sink. I told her about the fort and then showed her the flag. It was red and white and had straps that I could tie to a stick. Dad walked in as I was waving it around. Semaphore signal flag, he said. Sema what? Mom and I said at the same time. Semaphore, said Dad. Great Uncle Charlie was in World War II. Neither of you ever met him, but he was in the Signal Corps. He was in Belgium, or was it Guam? Anyway, I remember him telling your great-grandpa a story about some heroic military rescue using signal flags like that. Intrigued, I said, Tell me the story, Dad. Sorry, I just remember him telling a story. I don't remember what it was about. So much for heroic family history, I thought. But I do remember how to use the flags, Boy Scout thing. Were there two? 2 flags? I asked, just a little confused by this whole semaphore thing. Yeah, Dad said, with an odd shine in his eye. I thought maybe it had too much coffee. I think so, I replied. Go get the other one, Elijah, and I'll show you. I ran up to the attic, found another flag in the trunk, and took it to the kitchen. Dad sometimes had serious random access memory misfires. He was a brilliant accountant, or so Mom told me. That was how he paid the bills anyway. But he couldn't remember Great Uncle Charlie's exciting war story. But he could remember how to use those flags to send messages. Tying the straps to wooden spoons, Dad started snapping the flags with precise motions. He shouted the alphabet while waving the flags. Susie ran in to join the fun. She was learning the alphabet, and this whole demonstration was very exciting to her. Of course, Bumpy was with her. Susie waved her stuffed dog like a flag, yelling her ABCs along with Dad. No, said Mom to me while Dad and Susie were shouting ABCs for the 3rd time. You can't take the flags to the woods. Why not? Elijah, these whatever flags are antiques and probably valuable. This is a really nice place. I don't want you to lose the landlord's stuff in the woods. Look, how about an old t-shirt? Your dad has plenty. Dad heard that, then started a conversation between Mom and Dad about his old t-shirts. All of them seemed to bring Dad joy. Most of them were left over from his college days and were pretty ratty. Negotiations were heavy for a while. I finally got one. It was red with white lettering, but I had to promise to not lose it. Mom packed a lunch for me. I put that and Dad's old t-shirt in my backpack and headed out the door. Birds were singing and the sun was shining. Winter must be wearing out, I thought. There were birds in the city, pigeons mainly. I wondered what kind of birds lived in Nowhere, Ohio. I would look in the study and see if I could find a book on birds when I came home. Halfway there, I stopped and ate the sandwich. I found a big stick for a flagpole and took it with me. Hiking made me hot. I took off my jacket and stuffed it into my backpack. When I climbed the hill to the fort, I went instantly cold. There, stuck in a turret on a stick, was a red flag. Then I heard whistling. Thank you for listening. To hear more of the story, please come back soon, or you may purchase your own copy on Amazon. Just follow the link below. Until next time.